I can send this to you guys. Or like your way today. By the time we look at and kind of evaluate. Yeah. And then if you say, that gives them time to envision my you guys Yeah, the only thing is that you learn you have to be on top of the canceling, so you've got to really talk into it. So wear your mask and go.
Yeah, so let me go and say that. So again, I know that everybody's here and close. The biggest reason for the microphones now, so that people at home can hear you in this new modern age. So here's kind of the end result is. So
You'll see that you can hear me now. Okay.
You can't hear your voice, people at home can't hear you. So that makes sense.
Okay, everybody at home, we'll be getting going here in just one moment. Everyone's arrived, so give us 5 seconds to get it ready. I'm just going to test my, can you hear me? I can't tell. Is it on? Okay. So I guess I would encourage everybody then, if people are listening through cyberspace, we do need to use the mic. And if you catch me not doing it, please give me one of those or something. Okay, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. So Dr. Smith is on the phone. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6. So we have quorum. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to our meeting. This is a very strange. I haven't had a meeting in 6 months, unless it's been through some Zoom or Teams or some kind of strange internet. So you guys actually look good. You too, Courtney. You look good, man. You look good.
Got your credibility to hell there.
But I never thought I'd say that, but I really am happy to see you guys, and it's good to be back together again. And even though we've been on the phone a lot and stuff, but it's good to be back in the same room. So I'm just kidding, Courtney, having a little fun. But with that being said, there has been a lot of things going on that I'll get into in a moment. But we do have one order of business that we really need to address. As everyone knows, our dear colleague, Dr. Mullins, has passed. And this is our first meeting, our first gathering, really, that he's not here at the table with us. It's been a long time since I've sat here and Fred's not been at. Fred's not been at my side, and I still see him sitting there on that stupid iPad and distracting me, and then finding something on the iPad and then trying to tell me what it says, and I'm trying to listen to what Courtney's saying or Vic's saying or somebody, and then I miss half that, and I go, but he's always getting me in trouble. But anyway, we had some good times, and I could always count on Fred no matter what I needed. If I called him up, early in the morning or late at night and said, we need to look at this or look at this, he was always responsive. I've called him from my ER saying, Fred, I think I got a disaster coming. I'm getting a bunch of calls. EMS is calling. I forget what disaster it was, some bus wreck or something. I said, there's some burns. I'm going to need your help. He said, we got it covered. He said, we'll be standing by, and he mobilized his team. So, I mean, I didn't even have the right information, but I mean, he was just that kind of guy. So we fought some good battles in the pit, and he will be dearly missed. So I'm going to turn it over to Liz now. I think there's a video that we're going to, or Billy. Okay, go ahead.
The one thing I thought to bring today. So I can show it at home. There's technical difficulty. Is 1 second.
So I think at this time, if Dr. Ashton and I can hold there for a minute, we need to. I'm going to hold our microphone up close to us, Dr. Ashley. We just called Farrah Parker and Lisa Smith up from JMS. Dr. Ashley would like to say a few words on behalf of Dr. Mullins and his service to the commission.
So I think you know how I feel about Fred, and I think I speak for the whole commission when I say that he was a strong leader. He did yeoman's work. You all know that. You work with him every day. You got to be with him more than we did. And so on behalf of the commission, we wanted to give something, although it just pales in comparison, but some token of our appreciation to let Still Burn Center, to let all you guys that are still hurting, I'm sure, that know that he's greatly appreciated and will never be forgotten. So I'm glad that you all could be here today and accept this on behalf of the Burn Center. So it says, we will forever miss our dear friend, Dr. Fred Mullins. whose dedication and commitment to the Georgia Trauma Network Care Commission was unsurpassed. I think that says it very well. The impact you made here will be felt for many generations. Thank you very much. Okay, I will move into the rest of the chairman's report now, which will be brief. But basically, even though we haven't been meeting in person, there's been a lot of work going on behind closed doors, and I think, or in small groups, I guess I should say. And so I'd like to thank the budget subcommittee that's been meeting virtually every month for all their hard work, especially through the cuts and so on. I'd also like to thank injury prevention, who's been very active in getting grants out the door. So I'm sure we'll hear more about that today. There's a lot of exciting things going on in the Trauma Foundation. Had a great conference call actually last night. So we hear more about that subcommittee as well. And then EMS has also been meeting and continuing to work hard. So I appreciate all the subcommittees being able to work and work through this to keep the commission going. I'll have Liz comment on this more as we move throughout the meeting, or maybe here in just a few minutes, but we are working on virtual formats. We've got to keep working. It looks like COVID's going to be with us for a while, so we can't just quit meeting. So we're going to try to get that off the ground. Fortunately, we're a small commission, so it's, I think, much easier for us to meet in person than it is some groups that you all are members of. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Liz for the rest of the meeting.
For the rest of the meeting, you're
Well,
turning it over to me?
I guess maybe not the rest of the meeting. So I will, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So you have in your packets, there are several. We still had to approve our minutes from the January meeting, which was at the Capitol. That by far is the biggest packet in there. And what you see after the minutes are the attachments. Aaron has been putting together the attachments so that if you have any questions regarding the minutes, you can reference the original materials that were presented. So the on your little table of contents there, your January minutes start on page 1. And then we had 2 conference calls, if you remember. One, we approved the spend plan for FY21, and then you formalized that into a formal budget approval just last month on the 16th. So those 2 were pretty brief, but the January minutes were pretty. I don't know that you need a motion for each one. I think you can probably just approve all 3 of them with one motion.
If the minutes are the same as the website, I'll make a motion we accept them.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes. Can we get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, now we can open up for discussion. So did anybody have discussion or comments or clarifications, corrections?
And I think we'll, on the conference calls, we'll probably go ahead and approve the minutes now, just because of this new COVID era. That way we don't back up on minutes again to approve. It's a little tedious.
Okay. Okay, hearing no corrections, we'll go ahead and vote on the minutes. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Aye. Is Dr. Smith still on the phone? Just want to make sure we capture his vote. I couldn't hear.
Oh, Vic is also on too.
Because also, he
Yeah,
actually tried to make a
I-
motion to approve the minutes, so he approves.
Okay.
Thank you, Vic.
Okay.
And yeah, Dr. Smith, I'm asking you to unmute now.
Is he there?
He is. He was trying to speak just a second.
I'm here.
ago.
Yeah, I voted aye.
Hi, Dr. Smith. Can you hear me, sir?
I can. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Colin, is the speaker turned up on that for people to talk back to?
Hello, hello, hello.
Dr. Smith.
I can
try it
hear
again,
Dr.
please.
Smith.
I can hear y'all.
Vic, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Come on, look at this.
They apparently can't hear us, Doc.
Yeah, that's okay. And I think Dr. Smith can just let us know if he approves. We can record his.
Do we have a chat room or anything he can respond? Where will it come? Will it be up like my mic? Oh, I see.
I do want to say I appreciate everything that Billy is doing, trying to get us up and running virtually. And in the true spirit of the family, it takes a village. Billy has family helping. Tori and Colin, thank you so much for helping us try to get this going. We really, really appreciate all of it.
Smith typed in that, yes, he approves the minutes as well.
Okay, Liz,
Yeah, okay, so
let's move into your
next,
report.
yep, next, I just have a few things in here that I included in your packet for your reference, and we'll go over those relatively quickly, and then just a couple updates for you. One is the, we had to go to a Senate Appropriations hearing, which we never actually got to present because they ran out of time. But I included that document in your packet on page 52, what we submitted. Essentially, what they just wanted to hear from us was how we were prioritizing the use of our funds, knowing that cuts were coming.
We're being censored just in case anybody says anything. We'll be.
Okay, now that we got that fixed, we'll move on. So that just, I think the biggest thing is not so much the numbers, because as you well know, those change as we move things around in the budget to meet our allocations, but just the bottom table summary there that kind of highlights what our priorities are on page 52, Dr. Ashley, way in the back. Yeah, there's a lot of minutes there. And then under very exciting news on page 53 is that Dr. Bleacher's reappointment came through from the House Speaker. We're very excited. Dr. Bleacher, I know, is smiling with joy underneath that mask. Yes. And so then, thanks to Katie's great help in crafting some of our revenues, I think particularly in the age of COVID, it's important to keep an eye on what's coming in because that impacts our budget, right? So rather than just having you look at that table every time we meet, we tried to put this in a graphic format for you so you can sort of look at super speeder revenue in comparison to what our budget looks like. So the next, there's a couple PowerPoint slides there, and I believe it starts on page 54. And so 55 should be your first slide, which just looks at the commission's budget, which is in the red line, what we are allocated annually, and that's by year. And then you can see what the super speeder revenue is. And then Katie also put a line in there for the amended funds so that you could see that when they actually give us additional money, how close we get to that original super speeder funds. And as Dr. Ashley always reminds us, it's really through the good graces of the legislators that we get this money. Nothing is earmarked for us. We have to ask and hope that we get this money every year. So you can see with amended, we get fairly close to those allocations. And then if you look on the next slide, I believe that's 56 in your packet, we wanted to look at with COVID, how would that impact our revenue? Because we'd have to make some changes in our priorities if the revenue was falling. So I was really looking at those numbers as they came in because I was concerned we might not have the revenue from super speeder. But in fact, there has not been a huge dip in super speeder. So what we did was look at what's Q3 and Q4. So reminder that Q3 is January to March, and April, May, and June for Q4. So those would be the major months that would be impacted by COVID for this year compared to last year. So the blue line is super speeder revenue for that time frame for 2019, and then the red line is super speeder revenue for this. You could actually see that we even took a little bump up. So must be all the people speeding down the highways with no cars on the road. So, so our revenue story looks good there. So that's kind of encouraging. And then the next slide, though, we don't have a lot of years of this, but just looks at the fireworks excise tax revenue. So sort of just now ramping up. And then allocation for that is actually written in that code. So we don't have to ask for that money. There's a percent of the funds that come from those revenues that automatically go to us. So a lot different than super speeder. But I think based on what you saw with super speeder, we can feel confident going in with our ask and with an amended ask as well, because we know that the revenues are not falling off. I think the totals were about 23 million. So we're not far behind where we were for last year. Any questions on those numbers before we move on?
You said that we get a percentage of the fireworks excise. When you look at the graphs, it looks like the lines approach each other, so it's not a fixed percentage.
It actually is a fixed percentage, but you're right. It does look like it's kind of coming closer. But it is, I believe it's 40%. I should have written, when we look at this again, I'll write the rules. I had it on our original slide that we did in our appropriations presentation, but I'm not sure if that's the way the allocation.
To be clear, I'm not complaining.
Yeah, thank you, right. But we'll at least make sure. I'm not sure if those rules were in place when the revenue stream first started coming in, or if that's kind of how that shook out. Great question. Anything else on that before we move on? The next many pages in your booklet are the full budget. So if you're having trouble sleeping at night, you can crack this open. This is by department. This is traditionally what you see when you approve it. Now, what Katie has put together for us on the budget subcommittee to look at and review budget is just budget allocations by department, so that you're not having to look at a 15 worksheet page. But we thought, just for completeness, you should probably have this, just so you know where every single penny for every single, it shows you what you don't get to see. When we allocate money to the trauma centers, what you'll see in this packet is what percent goes to registry, what goes to readiness, uncompensated care, et cetera. So you can see those breakouts. So if you want to, if you have any questions about that, certainly I know it's a lot of material to look at, and we'll be looking at budget all year long. Budget will never leave us, as Dr. Medeiros knows. She's living and breathing budget right now. So we'll have to keep looking at that as we plan for our amended FY21 ask as well. So, but those are how the allocations broke out with each area. And then as you're looking at that, I'll just mention, I believe the last thing that I have there for you to look at is, or next to last thing anyway, I took our strategic plan, which was actually an attachment to those January minutes, and I converted it into an Excel document so that we could track our progress, because in September, along with our FY22 budget and amended 21 ask, we will have to give an updated version of our strategic plan. So, a lot of what our strategic plan was converted to was really optimizing our processes and really preparing for our statewide ACS system consult. in addition to expanding our collaboratives capabilities with the data platform to really enhance and give a boost to the collaboratives' ability to do our own internal benchmarking. We've had some detailed discussions on that in the budget subcommittee. That may become an integral part of our ask for FY21 because there's some exciting capabilities with that didn't exist before. So on the right is just kind of a very high level, like very basic red, yellow, green, like what red is we haven't done any work, yellow is work has started, but we're either in process or maybe there's some barriers, and then green are things that we've actually completed. So I'm proud to say, and much to the pain of poor Katie over there, is that a lot of what we've been working on is all of our finance processes. So we've really done a tremendous amount of work in looking at what we're actually spending, how we can optimize our dollars, how we can reallocate things, and know in real time when allocations aren't going to be spent, instead of having that money left over, work quickly to reallocate those funds in a meaningful way. So a lot of the processes that we're working on related to our finance process, related to our financial procedures will help us with that. One of the things that we did was engage Warren and Averett so that they could help us optimize our finance processes. And another great thing for FY21 is that all but one of our contract and grants have deliverables associated with them, and they're in the contract, similar to what the trauma centers have. So in addition to sending invoices for draws, we'll have to validate that they met those deliverables. And we worked with the stakeholders themselves to sort of figure out what made sense, because this is the first year that we're moving forward with that. So, and even doing all of that work and new invoicing templates, Katie did a great job in getting all of the contracts out the door by our target date of July 31st. So great job, Katie. Very happy about that. Thank you. So that was just kind of a very high level overview. Like I said, that's kind of where we ended up for the end of this fiscal year with regards to strategic plan. And I'll be making some updates to that so we can submit it in September, along with all the budget materials. And the last thing is looking at our 2021 meeting schedule, knowing, as Dr. Ashley mentioned, that things are going to be much different from now on. What we thought might help us is that if we, because I know everybody's time is there's more and more competing priorities. It doesn't get any easier, and even in this era of COVID where meetings are all converted to virtual platforms. But what we thought might be easier, instead of having a January meeting, which traditionally comes on the heels of the holidays, and there's not much happening between the November meeting and the January meeting anyway, is to take that January meeting and take the March meeting and just combine them into one February meeting. That gives us some time after the holidays to re-engage and figure out where the subcommittees stand. That also is probably better timing budget-wise for us to get our budget stories together. Katie and I and Dr. Medeiros, our budget subcommittee chair, we've talked about how we really kind of need to back that timeline up by about 6 months so that we're really ahead of the game when it comes to submitting materials for September, because they do want them really early. So if we did that, there were a couple meetings that happened. I know, Dr. Dunn, you made me aware of the Academic Surgical Society, I'm sorry.
Association for Academic Surgery.
That potentially conflicts with that, but we did steer away from Southeastern Surgical and Western. So it looked like that February 4th would probably be the best date to do that. That brings us back together in a reasonable time frame after the holidays. And then if we went with our traditional I think it's third Thursday, then it would be May 21st, August 16th, and November 18th for the remainder of the year. So if you, yes, sir.
Do we know when TQIP for 2021 is going to be?
I just heard within the last couple of weeks that for this year it's going to be virtual and don't know, but it was moved to December. It's now December, a December meeting.
It was going to be face to face in December as well. And then they made the decision to go to virtual. So it may end up being in December always.
I guess that's the question. Is it going to be, this year it was going to be in December, which was different. Is it always, have they made that change now? Is it always going to be in December or was that just something for this year?
We can find out.
I'm just curious because
Yeah.
December conflicts with the
And then-
Southern Surgical too. So people, you know,
Oh,
but so anyway.
it's going to be virtual. Okay.
Do you think that, I mean, I know we're face to face here now, but what is everybody's thoughts on being able to get together in a large group in February?
On when?
Because I think the intent was to, I don't know, I'm technologically challenged.
You just hit it one time and it stays on. Is that green?
No, you don't have to hold it.
Yeah,
Okay.
you don't have to hold it.
The learning curve. It should be pretty basic. There's only one button. You guys are in, can't see it, but there's one small button. It really shouldn't be this difficult. The intent was to have the combined meeting for the spring symposium as well. And I know we talked a little bit about that last night on our call, but I don't know what folks think that are in the midst of all of this, if that's going to be a realistic time frame for us to be able to get together in a large group or not.
So just to clarify, the February 2nd meeting is what we were talking about having Chateau in February because it's much more reasonable hotel room rate wise. Even March when we go now or when we have historically gone, the rates are pretty expensive. You start to compete with wedding season when you're talking about events. So February is really reasonable. So we thought we would, because many of you can't come to our advocacy day, not that we're going to have an advocacy day on the Hill this year either. We probably can't do that, but just trying to get our meetings in alignment, it would free up some other time and allow us to focus on what potentially is more important. So I look to you to see if you want to revisit this at the November.
It's a little hard for me to, I've been wrong about a lot of things with this COVID. So some of my predictions. So it's hard for me to say definitively. I guess my best answer, I just don't know. I think part of it depends on how hard we get hit in the fall. If it's going away and things are pretty light, people will probably start lightening up. If it's surging, then it'll be a different story. So I would think we just need to monitor it. And I'm open. I'd love to get together. I think try to get together. We're not a huge group, so maybe we can, you know, we're not like the American College of Surgeons or something with 20,000 people. We can't get people together, but we could probably practice social distancing and make it work, unless we're all just in the pit seeing COVID patients and stuff, you know. And then again, you know, our hospital's still under a travel ban as far as, of course, you know, I drive to Forsyth. I mean, it's my dime and right up the road, but, you know, getting hotels cleared and that kind of thing and running it through the chain that, you know, there may be pushback, there may not. It's just so far in advance. I don't know what we're doing.
Well, I think that'll be the biggest issue is whether or not the hospitals lift the travel ban, because that'll just decimate the meeting if the travel ban is in place.
Do we think, does this schedule at least look reasonable enough for us to plan? So we at least, even if we have to do virtual for the commission meetings, could we at least kind of plan on this sort of time frame? Again, that puts us as quarterly.
I think, me personally, I think that this way you've got it spread out works. What's everybody else think?
As long as we, you know, acknowledge that this is a tentative schedule, that this isn't set in stone, because a lot of things are going to change. over the next 12 months. So, but I'm okay with the dates as proposed.
I think I'm fine with the dates. Just have to kick it down the curve. Get down the road to find out. November, we'll know a lot more. I think we might be flexible until this goes away. I'm fine with the dates.
I think from a commission standpoint, see how y'all feel about it. I'm very comfortable meeting like we are today. You know, I feel safe, I feel comfortable. So if everybody else, so regardless of Chateau's a little bit different because you're talking about a bigger meeting and things, but as far as us meeting, I'd like to keep meeting in person if everybody's okay with that.
So if you're interested, I think we need a motion to approve these dates. I think a motion.
Are we
Okay.
still going to be able to have the option of doing this component of the web meeting?
What do you say? What?
Dr. Smith, was your question, can you still attend virtually?
Yes, sir.
We intend on continuing to have this option, so if we can continue to do that, it'll be great. Glad to be able to hear you.
I'm screaming.
You need to now. I think we figured out the glitch on our part, so thank you.
Is the King and Prince not available for that? Because last year we did have to bump it up into earlier in August. Do we know those dates yet? Yeah, I think at least since we don't know what's going to happen with the sort of symposium and day of trauma meetings, I guess we can at least use this as a framework for our meetings so that we at least know if we can meet in person, if we do move forward with Chateau. But I think it would be great to have that be a little bit more cost effective to meet in February and knock off another meeting on your calendar. And then as we get closer to St. Simon's, if we have to bump that, and if we can by November, hopefully meet in person again, we can just change. We can change that date. So Courtney made the motion, I guess. Do we have a second?
I'll
We have a
second.
Regina seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor of the dates? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have our agenda set for the year.
That sounds great. And just to wrap up my report for you, one of the other pieces that Billy has been working hard on is Billy created a motions document that really allows us to see historically the things that we've talked about and you have all voted on. And I think it's very eye-opening. Billy said it was a very good learning experience for him when he went through and looked at all the minutes. So what we're trying to do now, Aaron, after all of the meetings, including the subcommittee meetings, does a short form document that just includes some of the motions. Now, some of the motions just say approve, or I make a motion to approve as presented, whatever document. So that's why we're trying to give you the documents so you can reference back. But I think it gives a good historical perspective. So I'd like to, make that available to you in some format, or, potentially we could create a summary where we look at some of the important things that we've faced before. Like if you look at the GCOP collaborative data platform, that has been revisited for years now. So some of the things that we batted around have come up over and over again. So I think it would be good for historical perspective. I already mentioned to you about the contract deliverables. One of the things that we've worked so hard on through budget subcommittee is reducing the old fiscal year open purchase orders. And in fact, when the budget got really tight, that was one of the things that came from the governor's office, is that if you do not need this money, if the purchase order has not had any activity on it, it's going back to the treasury. So they sort of forced our hand with that. And I'm happy to say, I believe, Katie, we're in FY20 now. I mean, we really have closed out everything. So we are really in a much better place as far as that goes. And we're writing contracts such that entities have to spend the money, or we are going to reallocate it. And the one thing that Katie added to the trauma center contracts is that what we don't want to do is have contracts, and we're working with OEMS&T on this, because the hospital's payments are largely connected to their trauma center quarterly reports. So they have certain deliverables they have to meet before they can invoice. So it's not uncommon that some centers would invoice a year later. So they'll let the invoices pile up because they can't keep up with the deliverables. So somehow we're going to try to be proactive in that. And if you're having trouble and you're not submitting your quarterly report and you're not getting paid, we need to intervene with that and find out what's the barrier here. What can we help you with? Because usually it's a staffing change or something's going on. But if we're going to make the contractors spend their money, we can't not have the trauma centers doing the same thing. So we want to get everybody getting their payments to them by November after the end of the fiscal year. So that's one of our.
Did you hear that, Dr. Ashley? All the open POs are closed.
Yes,
Up
that's,
through
I mean,
FY20.
that's a lot of yeoman's work. Congratulations. Very excited about that.
This man and his team over here did a
First
lot of the
time.
heavy lifting for that, but it happened.
Well,
Yeah,
and
it's,
our GEMSA partners really, they really amped up the education. This is very challenging times to do education, but there have been very creative attempts to get courses done, people educated, things moving on. As I just look at, Crystal's doing the podcasts. I mean, we're thinking outside the box here to get things pushed out.
No, that's very impressive. Thank you all for working so hard. I know a lot of people were working on that day and night for a while to move that through. So
Yeah,
good work.
it's just good group work and great teamwork to get everybody on the same page. And everybody wants to spend the money and people want to go to the courses. We just need better ways of tracking. And again, through all of our, new and reinvented financial processes, we have better ways to do that.
Mhm.
So with some of these changes, and Karen will go over the FY 2021 pay for performance criteria for the trauma centers. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But we want to have, had historically, the commission had partnered with OEMS&T to do a trauma center orientation session. We actually did it here. But what we want to do this year is be a little bit more proactive and offer sessions for each level of center by WebEx so that nobody has to come in person and talk about the quarterly report changes as well as the trauma center contract changes. So everybody's clear, and we'll release those dates. Renee and Maria and I have already agreed upon 6 dates just for the trauma centers, and then we'll still do the orientation session. So that's for like people who are brand new to the trauma program manager role and go, what's my trauma commission contract? What's a quarterly report? They need a little bit more hand holding than the centers that have been doing this for a while. But as Dr. Medeiros can attest, even when you've been doing it for a while, sometimes something still trips you up, or you just need a little bit more clarification about some of the deliverables. And since some things have changed, we feel like it's important. So I'm trying to say these are mandatory. Of course, there's no P4P attached to it, but we really want people to be engaged, and we will record it. So that way, if somebody misses it, they can potentially look at the recording. And then the final thing that I did not think, I'm so shocked that I'm able to report this to you today, but the GQuip leadership role vacated by Kara has been posted already by DPH. Monday, shocking that it went out that
That's
quick.
great.
Yes.
Wow. Good work.
Yes, and we already have applications for it. So we're really excited about that. And we will move forward with assembling some panel interviews. I was talking with Dr. Dente as he came in this morning about getting Dr. Sharma, Dr. Dente, and some other panel to move forward with those interviews. So the application closes on the 16th. So we thought we will sort of carve out some time probably after Labor Day, because we'll have to do an initial review of the candidates and then putting together interview packets and things of that nature.
Good.
And that concludes it.
That's quite a report. A lot of good work. But thanks, Liz. I appreciate you bird dogging everything in between meetings and pushing us forward. So I think we're headed in not multiple directions, but a lot of things are headed in the right direction as we solidify and get more organized. So thank you. With that being said, we'll move into the system planning and regional report from Billy.
All right, so good thing is, well, I'll say it's a good thing is, there've been a lot of our activities that have been greatly diminished due to the COVID scenario. So my report will be fairly short and sweet. The first picture that was on the cover of my report there was one of the, I don't know if it was actually in your booklet or not. Oh yeah, there was. That's actually from one of the skills labs. We have done 2 skills labs over the last 3 months, so we're starting to get that ramped back up again. We did have to cancel one in Cobb County that was last month, and just because they had a spike in their COVID cases, and basically the officials from the county asked if we would delay that one. But we do have a couple more coming up, and we have some additional ones planned coming from for the next year. So just a brief thing. Basically, it still shows the statistics for the school response program and the Stop the Bleed, kit distribution. So you can see we still have about 4,600. We have about 10,000 left still to distribute. If you look at the very next page, you can still see the counties that are finished. We did change this a little bit. Remember, before we had the counties in red, so we did change it. So the counties in white are now complete. So essentially, they have stopped the bleed there, so they're no longer, and it uses less ink in the printing process. So, but you can see the counties here that we're working on completing. These are the ones for the actual school program themselves. The biggest one's going to be down here in the lower left-hand corner, the southwest corner of the state. Again, those were places that were hit by the hurricane last year, and so it really delayed a lot of their teaching that was supposed to happen. A couple of these other counties, Clark and Oconee, each have like 2 schools to get completed, so we will get that done. Yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
I always have a question. I know Columbia County is really big, but so we have about 10,000 kits on hand. How many will we need to finish out the rest of the school?
Not many for these. So most of the 10,000 actually go to school buses.
Okay.
So that's it. So that's a total for all the school buses. No,
Okay.
that's all of them. So
Okay.
so for most of this, and I do have to apologize. I just realized there's 2 other counties. Again, when I changed the colors on the map, I did error. So DeKalb and Clayton County are not quite finished either. So so those other 2 counties. So that really is it. It's really a very small percentage of the kits that will go to the schools project. It's the larger that will be going to the school buses. There are 22,000 school buses in the state, and so that's just kind of where that is, and we're just right at about halfway with those. So looking at the next, it does show the ones that are still left for the school buses for us to get complete. So that's going to be a larger percentage. So again, we have gotten quite a bit of them done, in the Metro Atlanta. We were actually able to get all of the DeKalb County school buses done. And I don't remember off the top of my head how many that was, but it was just a significant amount. So we can go back there and look. You can see like Region 5 is pretty much completed. Region 9 is absolutely complete. Region 1 is completed except for Cherokee County. And then Region 7, actually, Brian Doherty's doing a great job down there. He has Region 7 all done. So again, a lot of work being done in this program, but still significant delays with the COVID. So we don't know as to when we'll be able to ramp this back up, but we definitely want to make a big push to try to get this completed once everything comes back alive for us.
So it looks like the region that's all red down in the bottom corner, is that Region 8?
Yes, sir. That's Region 8. So something that I can say is exciting. So one of the things for Region 8 is in the past, they've not had a coordinator. They have had some funding to hire a coordinator, but for whatever reason or another, it just never happened. We looked at the logistics of our program, and of course, we had Stephanie Gendron, who's doing a fabulous job at Region 9. She's always been one of the first to complete her projects. And in that, we were paying her full time just for Region 9. We looked at that and said, okay, we probably need to reevaluate, especially with budget cuts. And so she's agreed to take on Region 8 as well. So I think that you'll see a very significant change in the outcomes there in Region 8 as we move forward. And also with Phoebe Putney wanting to come on board, they're absolutely wanting to take a leadership role as well. So so that's it. We just needed some direction down that way, and I think that you'll see some significant changes over the next little bit of course. All right. So on the next page, it just talks about. I'm sorry. Yeah, no pressure at all, Stephanie. You got this. You got this. All right. So next page, it all just talks about the regional trauma plans and business assessments. Just like to let everybody know when where everything is. So region, and actually I needed to fix that one. So Region 7 was the singular region that was waiting on getting their trauma plan completed. So they now have theirs done. I did not get it ready in time to submit to you guys for you to vote on for this meeting. So we'll have that ready for you guys next meeting, and that'll be the final region to complete their trauma plan. So that's also some very exciting news. On the next page, just wanted to let you know some things that we have gotten to happen. With the regional improvement grants this year, again, they were put out and needing to have the money spent by the end of the FY for 2020. And what a lot of the regions had put in for, and this was from the EMS subcommittee money, what a lot of the regions had put in for was education. And again, just a lot of courses were not able to be put on during that time. So the option was given to purchase disinfecting equipment, given the gravity of the scenarios with the COVID-19 stuff. So basically, we purchased about $200,000 worth of disinfecting equipment for agencies all across the state. We have purchased some additional sets of equipment, and we have them basically sitting in a warehouse. And we have some additional funding that we'll be looking to do in the future if there's other agencies that are going to need this. But one of them, the one that we purchased the most is right there in the middle. It's that green gun. In fact, it's over there. I used it to sanitize this room before you guys come in, and we'll redo it after everybody leaves today, just to make sure we can say we did our due diligence. But that's called a Victory spray gun. It's an electrostatic spray gun. So as the chemical comes out, it charges the chemical positively, and basically everything in this room is negatively charged, so it makes it bind to it. So it has a really high rate of disinfection. Other regions also chose to buy some of the lights, the UV lights, and basically we gave the regions the options of what they would like to do and how they'd like to make it happen. But that's been a very successful program, and the EMS agencies around the state are very grateful for the efforts of the commission to make that happen. Coming soon, so we're working on the regional metrics and PI programs. So just to let you know that I do have a couple regions right now who are manually pulling data and actually going through and looking for their time to definitive care. It's that holy grail metric that we're working on. So we're trying to do it manually for a couple of the smaller regions to see if we can make that happen. So hopefully we'll have something for that for you at the next meeting. And that is the balance of my report, unless anyone has any questions for me.
Really excited to hear about the disinfecting thing. I thought that was a great idea that whoever came up with that for the ambulances, that we could support and jump in. And certainly I'm glad to hear that it's working out well, because it's a little bit off cuff for us, but it sounded like the appropriate thing to do, especially in the emergency situation that we were in. So I hope that is working for EMS.
We've been very pleased. In Region 6, Sarah and Nikki worked on it really, and we essentially bought the spray guns, about them for each EMS and each acute care hospital, with the idea that if my ambulance happened to be at the nearest hospital with a COVID patient, they could get a sprayer from their hospital just to sanitize the drugs. It's given a lot of peace of mind to the medics out there. So I think that's been one of the best projects we've done. I'm very pleased with it.
That's good.
That was a quick action on the EMS subcommittee to put together that call for the approval of the equipment. And when I met with the governor's COO, Lori Smith, she liked that we were responding in that way. That was a way to assist with the COVID effort, but still in a way that, speaks to the protection of trauma patients. So
Yeah.
I think they were very favorable.
Good work. Okay, Billy, anything else?
So that's all for me at the moment.
Okay, any questions for Billy?
And Billy included his, every region has a regional report in there, and his report following that, so you can peruse that.
Okay, we'll move into the budget subcommittee. Dr. Maderos.
All right, guess I can steal most of the budget subcommittee's thunder already sharing with you the budget, but the budget subcommittee has been meeting every other month. I feel like it's every week, but on a very regular basis to get things on track. And poor Katie has been our workhorse because we pushed her way outside her comfort zone. As Liz mentioned, we need to back up our processes for budget planning significantly by about 6 months. So we've been pushing Katie little by little in the budget subcommittee little by little to back that up. Our AFY spend plan and the FY22 budget is due September 9th, which is right around the corner from now. So the budget subcommittee will be meeting next week to begin work on that. Katie's already put a proposed 22 budget together for us to look at. So we'll have that. One thing that Liz mentioned that I'm very excited about is I work with Warren Averett. Everybody now has standardized contracts, standardized invoicing templates, and report out tools. So we'll be able to have an overall balance sheet to look at for each of the contractors that we provide funding for. And we can look at expense to budget on a real-time basis so that if it looks like there may be some areas where expenditures are going to be challenging, we can intervene early on and not have to play catch up on the back end. So we will be tracking that with folks. And we want to work with folks, as Liz said, we want people to be able to spend their money. We want to be able to make a difference. But there are challenges that come up and we want to be very proactive in dealing with those challenges, not reactive to those. So thank you, Katie, publicly. I've mentioned this numerous times on the committee calls that we've had and with the called commission meeting, but I do want everybody to know on the line also and to the YouTube channel, which I think is pretty cool. To thank her for her hours. She stays up very late some nights on the phone and into the weekends trying to help because I'm very math challenged. We understand the process and budgeting and accounting. And I think hopefully by the end of this, I'll have an honorary accountant. Maybe not degree, but like, I don't know, a button. A little button. So thank you, Katie. And we'll entertain any questions that anybody has. We did give you the budget in the format that you're used to looking at, but I'll tell you now, because I really don't like that format. Enjoy it because hopefully if I get my way, it'll be the last time you see it reported that way. Much easier to look at it in line items to actually see what's happening as opposed to grouped together, multiple pages. We'll hide it, Katie, from her. Love it for us. Okay, fine.
Okay, any questions? All right, I think it is taking shape with the new format and I'm starting to understand it on the committee and I think it's looking good. So just proceed with what you're doing. I think it's good. And thanks, Katie. We do appreciate you taking it for the team. Okay, we'll move into the GCTE subcommittee report. Karen Hill. Karen here?
She's on the line, Billy.
Oh, she's on the line?
Yeah, her Zoom shut down. But hang on just a second, Karen. I think that Billy might need to unmute you.
This is good. Good practice. The first time out of the gate. We're gonna.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
There
Yes, I
goes.
can.
Absolutely.
You can hear me?
Yes, go
Hello?
ahead.
Okay, great. As luck would have it, my computer shut down to do an upgrade in the middle of the meeting. So I am not on the Zoom meeting anymore, just on the phone. So I apologize for that. We did have a meeting in May. It was brief, just really wanting to check in with everybody and see how everyone was doing, and wanted to also review the proposed FY 2021 pay-based performance deliverables. And walk everybody through that and made a motion to accept that, and it was reviewed and accepted in that meeting. So I think, Liz, do you guys have it up on your side where everyone can see it?
The commissioners have it, Karen.
Okay, great. My apologies, I can't get it on the screen because I'm not in the meeting. So first, I want to really thank Liz and her team for creating a document that is very well organized and clear. This spreadsheet that you see here that has all of the centers, and as well as the first column that says criteria for all centers, is just really laid out well. Is in addition to the scorecard that we just recently received that will be due next spring, and is also very clear. So thank you guys. I think that's probably going to help folks follow along very well. So in the first column where you have the criteria for all centers, the biggest change here is that the one required meeting for all centers will be now the spring 2021 Chateau Lawn meeting. It's a little bit easier to get to that venue and a little more challenging for the St. Simons one. So that one will be the one that is required for all centers. So that's the biggest change in that category. The other thing I think, Liz, that has made this easy, particularly for me, is how you've broken the domains down. So the first section there at the top, the system, so that's the Georgia system participation, things that are applicable to that. And then the second grouping there is the ACS optimal resources criteria. And then the other, which is the Georgia state requirement for our programmatic reporting, and then the GQIP at the bottom. And then also the total readiness dollars, the percentage that relates to each center. That's really super helpful. So in the second column, the level 1 and 2 centers, the biggest change there is down at the bottom. A lot of discussion went into adding national TQIP meeting attendance, because a lot of the staff at the centers were saying, of course, this was, I think this idea came up before COVID, and I'm sure as we are here, everybody's, shut down on traveling at all. And I know this at least will be virtual this year, but really important to try to get centers administrative support for attending that meeting because of the importance it is for us, particularly with our GQIP group. So I think that will be great. That is 0% for this year of your trauma readiness funding. But going forward, may have more discussions, at least for the trauma medical director or designee and the trauma program manager or designee. Any questions about that so far? Liz, do you have anything to add to that one?
I had a question on the attendance for the national TQIP meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Is that TPM or TMD? Do both need to attend?
It was, my understanding is it's meant to be both.
Okay.
With a strong consideration to also have the registrar or the PI coordinator attend as well. Any other questions?
It's on the green section, yeah, on your under GQIP specific, yeah. So let me just clarify on that. As Karen mentioned, some of the feedback was some of the challenges with meeting attendance in general. Now, of course, we already know that meeting is canceled, right? It's not going to happen in person. I think they're working on a virtual platform. So it's a 0% dollars at risk this year anyway. But what happens is, at least if you put it in the contract, it helps people. And remember, the level 1s and level 2s are getting sort of the lion's share of the funding, right? So the idea was to just put some focus around participation in this meeting because it's really helpful. In particular, TQIP has really broadened their offerings for PI staff as well as for registry staff. So we really want to encourage, however it's meaningful for the center, to just ensure that there's some level of participation in that. Otherwise, it's going to be really challenging to move your program forward. And we know that in these times, it's hard to fund any meetings, but given the amount of funding the centers are getting, it's kind of a small piece to add to that pie and something to just at least provoke some thought before we put some dollars associated with it.
I thought it was already, we had to go to that meeting. I thought it was already in there. It wasn't.
It previously was not required.
I think it's good because, you know, you need to play at the state level and learn and be part of the team. And it's a great meeting, the T-Quip meeting where we work together. So I think it's good.
I know when you come home, you feel so overwhelmed with all the things that you feel like you should be doing, but you're not doing. So we want other people to feel bad like us, right?
We've heard from some of our, I mean, I sat at a lunch table back at one of our state meetings and heard from some of the centers and trauma medical directors that like they couldn't get off to go to even the state meeting because they, you know, the guy that I was talking to was on vacation. He took a vacation day. So our folks need to be protected, and the only way you do that is put it in a contract.
And Chris and Kara had worked really hard to put together a collaborative breakfast and things, and it's a good time, and if everybody comes and participates, it's a great opportunity to exchange ideas and things too. So, I mean, if you can't get there, you can't participate. I think having that as part of a focus, to go back to your institutions and say, well, you know, it's a requirement for us for the funding we receive. This is what we get, this funding. Hopefully it'll help more people get to the breakfast. We'll actually talk and not just breakfast.
I think this is really good. I like the way you've got it laid out too.
A little bit easier.
It's much easier to see. The level 3s and level 4s are in here. I think this is starting to really take more shape like a global package. It's probably something, we've already published one paper on paper performance.
It's time for the second iteration.
I think it's time for the second, based on this sort of new model, how we're laying it out and what we're doing. And that might be something for, I don't know which meeting, but it would be something of great interest, I think. So we need to think about that.
I agree. I find it very, very helpful. And then to include the total percentage of readiness dollars at the bottom, I mean, it just makes it very clear. Liz, I did have one question on number 17 for the level 1 and 2 centers. Just to clarify, the day of trauma, the GQIP meeting will now be the St. Simon's meeting, correct? And that's only required for level 1 and 2?
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. I think it's corrected on your scorecard, but Katie and I will make sure. That's why I didn't include the scorecard since the contract just went out. But yeah, so
yes, I
essentially
think it's correct on the scorecard because I did look at that.
So that means that the 1s and 2s will be required to attend spring and what we call fall, which is St. Simon. So they're the only centers required to do both those meetings. Everybody, we wanted a spring meeting because it's just nice to have everybody together at one meeting so we can talk about system things, and we probably need to reorganize ourselves so that we have enough things to address for 3 and 4 centers, because I think sometimes I feel a little alienated when we get so focused on our, you know, first world problems of 1 and 2s.
So
right, and I think
go ahead.
What was the question?
I was going to say the spring meeting's the one that's mandatory
for everybody.
For state. Okay.
That one's mandatory for everyone, and then the St. Simon's fall one would just be mandatory for the level 1 and 2, and focus that more on the GQuip stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to make sure the level 3s and 4s are still included and are at the table.
Yes, so everybody together at the spring meeting, and then anybody who wants to come to fall meeting, but mandatory for 1s.
Sounds good.
And that's a little bit more of an expensive venue, St. Simon's. And again, if we do February, if we're able to do it at Chateau, it'll be even more reasonable cost-wise. So that's why we did that way. Talking with Renee about this, we may need to find a way to let the centers pick which meeting they want to go to. I just felt like it would be so important if we can go back to face-to-face. It would be so nice to have everybody at the table at just one meeting.
Yes.
Agree. So moving on to the level 3 centers, the biggest change here, previously it was the same requirement for someone from the program staff to be on a GCTE subcommittee. And with the bandwidth that they had, felt like, you know, that was a lot of meetings. So instead of that commitment now, we're changing that to participating in rural level 3, level 4 work group. and that'll be for the level 3s and the level 4s. So instead of extra GCTE committees, it would be something specific to them and what their needs are. As well as the change down number 13 under level 3 centers to achieve and maintain ACS verification by 6/30 of 2024 is also an additional change. And then again, the updates to the percent of total readiness dollars at the bottom. So 80% for level 1 and 2, 60% for level 3s, and 19% for level 4s. Any questions or anything, Liz, that you want to add further?
I just wanted to say that, you know, when we started talking about this was right around the time that ACS suspended all visits. So this timeline is subject to change. And Renee and David and I have had much discussion around this, and the timeline for state visits. Everybody is impacted by this, even Pennsylvania. Deferred all of their visits for the rest of the year. So, and Renee just mentioned that ACS is talking about even for early 2021, they don't know if they're going to get back in the game yet. So timeline's subject to change, but again, it's a 0%. It's out there so people know it's coming. So the idea is preparation is key for this. Anything else? I think you can go ahead with a level 4, Karen.
Yes, and then the level 4 is the same as the participation in the level 3 and 4 work group. And then the center hosting the, and participate in one rural trauma team development course by the end of June 30, 2021, which I assume would also be, you know, subject to change due to, you know, meetings and education, et cetera. Anyone have any questions? Well, thank you again, Liz, for the, go ahead.
Worth mentioning is that GCTE decided to allow the burn centers to work together to come up with meaningful criteria just for burn centers. And their at-risk dollars are 40%, and we use the ABA criteria to give them a couple criteria. So we were a little bit later in approving that through that work group. So I'll make sure you have a copy of what the burn center criteria are, but they have system participation as well, spring meetings. So again, everybody's together. And then they have the same, they're under the same criteria for all centers with the exception of the concurrent registry, because the burn, the ABA doesn't do the 80% within 60 days of discharge. They don't use the same criteria. Their registry is not as rigid around that. So we're not using that. And there's no burns urgent response piece around that.
Thank you for that. Yes, that's since our last meeting. So thanks for that update. And thank you again, Liz and team, for organizing this where it was very, very easy to understand.
Good.
Thank you, Karen. Any other questions for Karen? Great work, Karen, and your subcommittee. This is, you know, the pay for performance over the years has really progressed along. It's really impressive to see where it's come. So this is great work. And thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, let's move into the EMS report. Courtney.
So we've spent a great deal of our time working on budgets. A lot of appreciation to Katie and Liz and the folks from Jimson about getting our back POs worked out. We have a subcommittee that was working on that specifically, and we've been able to resolve that group. Those work got done, and we're pretty much where we needed to be. Extremely, Billy has talked about the victory sprayers. Those were one of the things. Region 5, Crystal in that group, electric UV lighting systems for their ambulances. Another good way to disinfect ambulances. The goal was to make sure if we pick somebody up in a car crash or gunshot, that we didn't bring them to you with something they didn't have before they got in our ambulance, and that our medics would be safe also. I think it speaks well to the organization, how quickly we were able to get that done. Quite frankly, there was a huge issue about getting it done very quickly because those things were selling very, very fast. The people who got their orders and first got them, and we got there pretty quickly. So I was real tickled about that. We've
We should-
I'm just curious, like, how many people would order, is it like 100 or 500, 2,000? I have no idea. Like,
Yeah, I,
volume.
yeah, in Region 6, I think we ordered like 26, 27. And
So total across the state, we ordered 139.
so one of the things that we did also was we bought 55 gallons of the disinfectant chemical for everybody who got a gun, got 55 gallons of chemical, which will last a good little while. And we're encouraging the services to work with their regional coalitions, which is another healthcare funding spin down that has money. So in the future, there's disinfectant becomes gone, that they can go back to the coalition and ask them to replenish the fluid. So we're hoping that that will be a long-term success story, so that the medics will be able to continue to have that. It just worked out very, very well, and I'm very appreciative of that. I think the other big thing that we're trying to figure out is how do we spend our money on training. Training has been difficult because most of the EMS training is hands-on in class, learning new skills. And under the COVID, that has been a problem. So we've had to cancel a couple of classes, but once the governor kind of relaxed things, GIMSA was very quick to get classes scheduled back, and they really ramped back up, so I'm appreciative of that. We've had a good discussion about the conference. GIMSA does two big conferences. The leadership conference in the spring was canceled because of the COVID, but they also do a fall conference. It's focused on educators. Educators need specific training and specific CEU hours. And there's been a great deal of discussion about whether that should be canceled or not. Right at the moment, it's not canceled. They're trying to wait to see exactly what happens. We have asked them, or I have asked them, to develop a fallback program. I'm trying to like for us to develop a platform for virtual training. And I know that's something that not only we could use, but the nurses can use as well, EMS can use. So they've been working on that. A lot of the EMS stuff, and probably some of yours, the Pinnacle conference this year went virtual. So we're trying to figure out how to make that happen. The big problem for us in the EMS world is not so much the ability to broadcast the information, which is kind of a technical leap. But the bigger thing is how do you validate when somebody was there? Because for us, the CEU hours are pretty critical. And we need to make sure that if the student registers, that they actually get the content. And the idea of going online, registering, and then let the computer run and then go play golf and come back. Well, you got to find a way to validate the fact that the medic was there. So they're working through all of those things, and we hope to come through that with a better program, a better plan. And if the conference continues on, it won't be quite as critical. If it doesn't, we'll be able to get that up and running so that we get the education out there and get the money spent for it. That's pretty much what we have been working on. Tick will answer questions or have Liz or Billy or anybody add to that. That's the first time I've been short.
That, I keep sitting here waiting for something else. That's the shortest report in history.
Well, we've also, the EMS subcommittee's got on a regular meeting cadence, I think, and we've had a couple ad hoc meetings as well for some of those split decision.
Liz has been kind enough in Huey to arrange for the public safety building in Madison. It's a big room and we're able to socially distance so we can get together. And it's been, I won't tell you it's always congenial. I bring up some things that I get beat up on, but most of the time it's been pretty congenial. And it works out really well.
Good. Well, I commend your all's work, especially on the, what's it called? The victory, what's it?
Well, we use the victory sprayers.
Victory sprayers. Okay.
Region 5 bought the UV lights.
Mm-hmm.
So either one works, just for different technologies. So.
All right. Well, great work.
Okay.
Looks like the Injury Prevention Subcommittee, Dr. Bleacher.
Yes, the Injury Prevention Subcommittee met in July. We had a productive meeting. First thing that we did, as was just mentioned with the EMS Subcommittee, is we set a schedule, a quarterly cadence to our meetings, because prior to that, they had been pretty much ad hoc. So now we'll be guaranteed to be meeting on a regular basis. Also, we engaged in determining the membership of the subcommittee, making sure everybody was still committed and the stakeholders were still wanting to participate, and that was a resounding yes. We're also recruiting new members, and in the case of leadership, we decided it would be important to have a vice chair in case I was unable to participate or continue on. And so Vic Drotti is going to be the vice chair of the Injury Prevention Subcommittee. We also announced that we have engaged one of the iPrice practicum students for some research project for us. Liz, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so this is the first time we've done this, and it's just really exciting because she's actually looking through our DPH partners. She's partnered with Liz Head and Phil to look at some of the administrative databases and try to put together like an injury pattern story for us and make some recommendations off of that, of what we could spend our funding on, what would be the biggest bang for our buck. So, you know, it's a student project, so we're not entirely sure what we'll get, but I think it's a great experience for the student, and it's more than we've had in the past. So I think we're on the right path, and potentially we can grow this, and now we can use the subcommittee structure to interview candidates and have a much more formalized process. We only had 2 applicants anyway this time because it went out pretty close to when they had to make their selections, because it's kind of a summer thing that they do. So her name is Leela Ibrahim, and she works at Emory as well as being a student there, and she's got some practical experience with handling large databases. So I'm real excited to see what could come of this. I have weekly calls with her. She updates me with her progress. So she's now extrapolated data. She's exported some Excel sheets on different mechanisms of injury. So she's putting that together, and her format will be that she'll do a description of what her, how we were able to narrow the question. Obviously, the question has to be narrowed based on what data is available. She'll kind of show you the picture of her findings, and then she'll make recommendations for what she thinks could be a good use of some injury prevention funding as part of that line item we now have in our budget. And then she can also do a next steps thing for if we get another student, what could be the next logical step based on things that she could not spend her time on due to the limited time. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Bleacher.
And then finally, just an update on the IP grants that we've awarded. We are in process of getting the paperwork back from the different institutions so that we can pay out the money. We're almost there. We had obviously a little hiccup with the COVID pandemic, and so it's a little delayed, but it will be processed pretty soon. That's it.
Sounds great. Dr. Ashley had to step out for a minute, but Lori Mabry, we put Lori's foundation report right after this because she does have in your packet, you have the information. We can finally release the names of the grants. So I think, Lori, if you wanted to pick up there, and oh, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a question for Dr. Bleacher. There's several awarded injury prevention grants. Is there a way we can get, once those studies are done, is there a way we can get just a high level results of what those studies found and next steps or advances in injury prevention would be great.
Right, and as part of the grant, there's a requirement for reporting results back to us, so there will be that feedback.
Yeah, and Lori's going to talk about that in just a second. And what is nice is when Lori when her report continues on for the research award updates, you're going to see something very similar for these injury prevention, because you're right, the information sharing piece is very critical for this. So go ahead, Lori. Press the button and speak.
All right, she's online. Okay. Yeah, so with the injury prevention grants, really our ultimate goal here when we first brought this to attention was to be able to develop replicable programs that, if successful through this grant, that they would be shareable, and that the commission would really sort of take some ownership in these programs and be able to administer them throughout Georgia. So they're sort of pilot programs, not that all new ideas, but they are, they do all address our top mechanisms of injury. And the idea is to be able to replicate these. So they all have different timelines, but they will report, just like the research grants, they will report twice a year. We're going to stagger that so you're not hit with reports from both research and injury prevention at the same time. So you'll get the injury prevention updates. I think we decided, Liz, I don't know, February and August or something like that. They'll be staggered, but they are required to report their expenses to date and their progress to date on each one of the projects. So, but I must say that we didn't really know what to expect with these injury prevention grants, but the fact that we got 21 full applications and that our grading scale, there was fractions of a point that really separated all of these grants. So there's really high quality injury prevention going on around the state. And I mean, it's a mission of the foundations, but I do urge the commission to keep it as a priority as well, because it really is a low budget win, in my opinion. So more to come on that. They will, like Dr. Bleacher said, we're just waiting on one more paperwork to go through, and then we'll be able to execute all of these grants. And then just to continue on with the foundation, if that's okay, Liz, I do want to just mention that it is also a difficult meeting for us to be here without Dr. Mullen's presence. We have been in quite a transition period, just as much as several agencies who lost their leaders. So I do want to ensure the commission that we are working to restructure and rebuild and move forward. And I want to thank Dr. Bleacher for stepping up into our chairman role to help lead us through this transition. We have developed a executive committee that Liz and Dennis have been part of, as well as our foundation consultant, to really help us figure out this transition, to set our priorities. As Liz mentioned, we all have deliverables as part of our contract, and one of our, or a couple of our deliverables include building our board and hiring the development director that we had planned to hire 6 months ago, but all that being on hold due to COVID, we are now back up and running and really trying to refocus and restructure. So we are trying not to skip too many beats and continue the work that Dr. Mullen's laid out for us and the vision that he laid out for us. So rest assured, we are moving forward. Just a couple of highlights. I know looking at our annual report, it's a little sad. It's a little sad that we're not meeting in St. Simons right now. And the fact that we've had to cancel so many things, postpone so many things. I think one of the greatest things about our state is that we do meet regularly as a state. And I think it has taken a toll on our system to not meet for a full year. A lot has changed in personnel with our trauma centers over the past few months. And we just don't want silos to be built or people to feel like there's not a support system here in Georgia for them. So it is our priority to get meetings back together, making people feel like they are part of a well cohesive group and trauma system. So whether we meet personally or not in February, we will meet. We will figure out a way to reconnect and get people back working together. So just a quick, even though we had to cancel a lot of things, working with the GCTE Education Committee, we were able to bring several courses that were slated to be in-person courses. We were able to bring them online, including the TCRN prep course, topic, TCAR. So we were able to get most of our education done, with the exception of a couple of TNCCs and ATCN courses that require hands-on that just weren't feasible to do. And you commission members may know already, but it was decided really before COVID not to provide any funding for nursing education in 2021. And honestly, with COVID, it's probably okay that it's okay anyway, but it is really our hope, working with GCT and the foundation, to be able to really analyze and look at what we've done for the past five years, including the foundation, maybe a little further with TAG. But we would like to see, really like to look at what else has been offered, who's all been trained, get us some good numbers, a good report of the education that's been funded through the Trauma Commission, as well as developing a better process for where courses are hosted, who's available to teach them, and the process of getting reimbursed for that. So a lot to work out in 2021, but we're excited to really work towards that and improve education as a whole for the trauma system in Georgia. Any questions on the education stuff before I keep going? Okay. And really, I don't know that there's much more other than the research grants. They are up and running. Liz, I provided the report in May. Did the commission get those?
I'm going to say no, because we didn't meet. Everything was
Okay.
canceled. We only had the meetings to approve budget. So this
maybe
is the first that they actually have in their packets. So
oh, perfect. Okay.
they're the ones that are here now. You didn't have a separate one, right? Because these are dated April, I think. So
No, those are the last ones.
sorry. Yeah.
So
those are the ones.
Okay,
Those are
great.
the correct ones.
yeah. So all of the commission funded grants are up and operating. We did offer a 1-year no-cost extension to all of those grants. Due to COVID, a lot of research departments closed their clinical research for a time period. So we've given everyone an extension on that, and their update should come again in November. But really exciting work coming out of there. Some are really rocking and rolling. So we're excited about that. And the foundation also has 2 smaller grants that are also, one's pretty much complete and one we also give an extension to. So I know that there's not any funding in 2021 as of right now for research, but this is something that the foundation will keep as a priority and try to offer our small grants as much as possible. But we are happy to be a part of the research program and see what comes of that. And really, as I mentioned, we are in the process of hiring the development director. We had a discussion about that last night, and that will be moving forward as of next week. That job should be posted. And we had to postpone our annual gala. We moved it to October, but now we're going to have to continue to probably move it a little further. So as soon as we can get back to doing those live events, we will keep you posted. But I think that's it for me for now. But if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. All right.
Thank you, Lori. A lot of exciting stuff going on with the foundation, as I think you can see, and definitely moving in the right direction. So good work. Okay, we'll move in now to the GQuip report with Dr. Dente.
All right, I have a brief update as well. As you heard from Liz earlier today and from the email that a lot of you got earlier this week, our executive director, Kara, moved to Boston last year. She'd been working remotely, but that really wasn't a sustainable thing. So as of earlier this summer, she's no longer in the role. But it is exciting that the position is posted already with a goal of starting to interview people in September. The collaborative itself has had a fair bit of momentum when we got hit by COVID. We have 25 unique institutions in either one or both of the sides of the collaborative. The TQIP side had accomplished several things. We have a new VAP guideline, version 2 of that. We had looked more deeply into our acute renal failure population. We've now done a handful of drill downs, all of which show pretty significant discordance with what TQIP considers low probability events. And that's something I really think that we need to continue to explore. Then we had pediatric imaging guidelines. On the NISQIP side, they had a good winter meeting. They participated in the quality conference, and we actually have a quality scholar, one of the residents now, who's assigned to the collaborative to help us push things forward. They're doing their own drill down exercises. They did a preliminary but a pretty large analysis of the opioid prescribing patterns amongst the NISQIP centers for specific general surgery procedures with the goal of developing a state-level opioid reduction program. And that's something I'd also like to explore on the trauma side. Jesse Codner, the resident, actually got a TL1 grant to look at sepsis profiling and prevention. So that'll be another thing the NISQIP side is looking to do over the short course. Moving forward, as we reboot the collaborative with a new manager, I think we have to do a global reassessment of what we're doing. And that may include a survey to ask centers what quality programs they'd like to see us push forward. And that'll align with the deliverables from the commission. I do think we need to continue the drill downs and really try to figure out what we're getting out of TQIP so we can maximize our use of that platform, lacking our own platform, although it is exciting to hear that that's still under consideration moving forward. I want to expand on our cross-validation exercises, which obviously have been paused, and then consider looking at our opioid prescribing patterns after specific traumatic injuries. So that's my update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
And Dr. Dente, just in regards to the trauma, potential trauma, or looking at the trauma aspect of overprescribing opioids, Memorial's done some work in that for the general surgery section, what you guys have done. So we've got some processes in place and data gathering techniques available. So Memorial would be more than welcome to participate in that.
I love a volunteer. I said I love a volunteer. Yeah. Anything else? You're all looking at me. Okay. Do I just hit the button again to turn this off? Yeah. Okay.
All right, thanks, Chris. Great work, and you're right. We were doing great, and COVID hit, and it's slowed us down. But we'll get back on track. Still a lot of good things going on, though. Okay, so now we'll move into the Office of EMS and Trauma update. David or Renee, whoever's up.
I'll start. So on page 123 of your handout, you have the report. This was prepared by Dan Linwell, who is our epidemiologist for trauma. Liz and Renee and I and Marie have had significant discussions about kind of the data that we wanted to be presenting. And this is a result of that. So and hopefully y'all had a chance to go through it. Well, I don't think we're gonna go line by line on this one. But the data is from 2017, 2018, and 2019, ISS greater than 15. There are some tables that include all ISS, but it's primarily the ISS greater than 15. And it's from designated and non-designated trauma centers. Now, the non-designated are ones that are in the queue. So they're submitting data, but they're not yet either to that full year of data or just not yet designated. And so it kind of breaks it down into 4 different areas. So number 1 is just looking at the frequency of patients with an ISS greater than 15 that were cared for in a level 1, level 2, and then not level 1, level 2. Number 2 is looking at the frequency of double trauma transfers. So to the first, to the second, to the third hospital. Number 3 is looking at EMS scene time. Now keep in mind, when you look at the data for number 3, it's EMS scene time from the data that came from the trauma registry. So this is not all trauma scene times. This is only the ones that made it into the trauma registry. So obviously there are other calls that, other trauma calls that just don't make it into the trauma registry in there. And then looking at number 4 is the time to the definitive care, which is explained on that slide. But for, again, for patients with an ISS greater than 15 for that area. Do we want to go through any of it or questions on it? I don't want to read it, but if there's any specific questions, and Marie's available online too. If there's any
Can I just pause you for 1 second? So yes, we had many discussions about what to look at. And so where these 4 metrics came from, because there's very little in the literature on what metrics to use for system health. These are just some things that came out of the last TQIP meeting and the systems PI meeting. So, you know, David and Renee, Marie, and Dan Lynn were gracious enough to just kind of take a look at this. So I know it's a lot, and you got it Monday, so we can evolve this over time. And now that David and Renee, Danlin, and Marie are seeing different things in this data, there may be different ways that we want to look at it. But what has come up in different systems is that phenomenon of double transfers. And it's predominantly seen in systems where there's a desire to maintain the patients within that healthcare system. So in other words, you know, it may go to one of the, patient may present to one of the system hospitals that's a non-designated center. And then instead of going to the closest appropriate, it stays within that hospital system and maybe goes to a further away center that can't necessarily handle it, then necessitating a second interfacility transfer. And those are the kind of things that are thought to have really long care, because typically the patients will get workups at both facilities. So it's not to say that it's necessarily occurring, but we don't have evidence that it's not occurring, and it's really the only thing that's out there as the system metric. So that's where that sort of came from. And then the focus on the ISS greater than 15 is because we know those are the ones with critical injury, because it's essentially, you know, critical, non-critical. So we figured having the whole data set would help us figure out like sort of what % those critical injuries. And so again, just to start, so very much over time, I think we can evolve this to what we think helps. And then as there's more literature on what system metrics look like, we can evolve to that as well.
And this is something we'll continue to update quarterly. So that we'll have, obviously, we'll have a quarter worth of data each time that we've done. These are just the first 3 years on there. And for the double transfers, those are listed on page 137. So there was actually only 31 double transfers in the 3-year time span. And you can actually see the columns are, you know, where did they start? Where did they go for number 2? And then where did they go for number 3? And you see, you know, a few of them are out of state hospitals. So they were, you know, being transferred to another hospital. And what we would like to do in the future too is look at this geospatially and see what regions are these. I mean, are these out of state transfers? Are they because they're bordering? I mean, are they in Augusta and they're going across the road? I mean, right, where are they? And then kind of, are these based on regions, right? I mean, is there some kind of, you know, regionality to why we're getting double transfers? And really looking at them to see, was it, as Liz says, was it justified to do that double transfer? Was the reason for that? But obviously, there's not a whole lot of them. So, but before I go to the other stuff, were there any questions on this report that Marie or I or Renee could answer before I go to the other?
No specific questions, just this is the first time I've ever seen any data
from the state trauma system. So this is actually encouraging. I think there's obviously room to narrow this down and to get some more granular visualization of what's going on. But to answer Liz's question, I think it is a problem of, I mean, I have personal experience with that. And I guess I have a question for the Trauma Commission is, do we have a stance on that? You know, the national stance is the trauma patient should go to the closest trauma center. I don't think that's necessarily happening 100% of the time, but I don't know how big of a problem it is and what the patient outcomes are when that doesn't happen. I think that might be helpful to look at in addition to what's our stance as a trauma commission. Do we have any way to enforce that?
It's a good point, Jim. I don't know that, I mean, I just state what I know. I don't know that we have a stance on that. I think this is the first time we've seen any data to say it happens or it doesn't happen legitimately. We all have our own thoughts. So, so I guess to answer your question, and for me, personally, I don't know of any stance. I'll open it up to everybody else for comment.
One of the reasons I, again, came out of TQIP, the system session, so that's kind of what sparked our interest to say, well, hey, we got all this registry data, let's take a look at something, right? And like you, I had personal experience with this as well. So, and unfortunately, by the time the patient gets to you after they've had 1 or 2 transfers, then what do you have to work with, right? Like, it's not much, you know, and so the outcome's going to be terrible if that happens. So the first thing was to sort of validate, is that indeed happening? Now, I don't know that our data would really give us a lot of confidence because, as you know, we don't, a lot of times, you may not get that very first hospital's paperwork. You have no idea where the patient came from. It's like whisper down the lane. So one of the things that it would tell us, and maybe, again, if we once we have our GQIP position filled, this could be a data, because I think part of this is, it's probably not part of the NTDS data set. I don't quote me on that, I'm not sure. But we can focus on that as part of our own Georgia trauma data set, is to make sure that if the patient, even if you don't know the name of the facility where the patient came from, first hospital, because you might, you know, you're relying on that other hospital sent it to you. Maybe if there's just a way to indicate that the patient had a first center before they had a second center before they came to you, or, you know, whether it's, you know.
The other thing I would like to look at, and I'm not sure we're going to have the data to be able to look at this, is the problem with keeping a patient within the same health system that sometimes causes the patient to jump out of their region to get to the other health system. You know, and I don't know if there's even a negative outcome on that. It'd be nice to look at for sure, because if nothing else, it's a hassle for the patient's family to follow that patient. And I think just at the core of it, it just sounds wrong, you know? So even if you're not transferring to even if you're transferring to a level 1 trauma center, I think it's not the closest level 1. And I think it'd be nice to look at that. But I think the issue we're going to have is, well, the reason we transferred out of region is because that region's trauma center was on diversion, or they couldn't handle it, or their neurosurgeon was out of town, or whatever. And I don't know if that's going to show up in the data set. That's the problem.
We did, Renee and Marie, for this fiscal year, for the quarterly report, we did add a diversion table, similar to what you would fill out for your ACS PRQ, which would list your diversion instances and then a reason for that diversion. So not at the point where we could match this up yet, but at least, again, we've got data coming in on self-reported data.
Well, I wonder, David and Renee, since the number of double transfers is manageable in this report, would it be, you can identify them by registry number? Marie has the registry number. So yep. I wonder if then it would be beneficial for us to have Marie or Renee reach out to the center and then come up with, Dr. Dunn, sort of what are the elements we'd like to look at for each of these, for their 30 something.
31.
double transfers so that maybe we can get some idea around the ones that we have before we're going to collect prospectively, but maybe we can retrospectively look at these and, you know, you're not giving out information, private information. Like if it were my facility, you'd call me and say, okay, you had these 3 cases. Can you drill down into these 3 cases and see as much information as you can? Maybe we can reach out to the center that transferred to us so we can kind of build some stories around these cases to see, are there similarities, are there differences? We would be able to see, did we get the transfer because of diversion? Usually that somehow noted, or we have the recordings for the calls, that kind of thing.
Well,
maybe we can get a little bit more information.
And one of the things we've talked about is, and this is another part of it of my report, all of our trauma centers are now in our license management system. So the same way EMS agencies are in there. So the October reports will be submitted electronically. And so one thing we've talked about is we'll be able to update that form very quickly because it's all just an online form. And what we've talked about is with these trauma, the double transfers, is if they are able to, in their previous quarter, identify that, is go ahead and tell us what happened. If you can do a little analysis on why was that a double trauma transfer, they can go ahead and put that in that report. And it's not like we're looking at them and go, oh, that's a bad thing. It's let's just see. Let's see what was the reason for that double trauma transfer.
Hi guys, this is Marie Probst. In table 2E2, you'll see the number of the third facility is not designated and out of state. And we couldn't tell the reason why the third facility was a non-designated or out of state facility based on just the data that's in the registry. Yeah, there you have it. So we have 18 patients that went to a non-designated or out of state facility as the third facility. And it could be that the patient went back to the original facility after they were treated at the second facility, and they could have, just gone back to the third facility, which may have actually been the very first one in their hometown, or to finish healing and recovering. So that's another piece of this puzzle that would be good to know.
Yeah, I think you're right, Marie, because there's one that went from a level 3 to a level 1 and then to a level 3, which really doesn't make sense from a clinical perspective, but would make sense if the acute period were treated at the level 1 center and they were returned back from the original center that transferred them for the remainder of their stay, or perhaps it's a swing bed or something. So that's why I think it would be helpful to look at the cases you guys have identified. It would be possible to do so, or Dr. Ashley, Dr. Dunn, is it something you think would be beneficial spending some time digging into?
I think it doesn't sound like a lot of patients. There's only 18. That's for what time period?
3 years.
Wow,
That's
really?
2017 to 19.
There's 31 total over 3 days.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not a lot.
That's not a lot of patients.
Small number, which is good for us. Probably not.
But the problem is those 18 we won't have the final record for because it's either out of state or a non-designated. So
right, but we could, a lot of times
the,
family
the
lives there
13,
and try.
that's a pretty manageable number.
So David, I'm looking on page 140.
140.
Yep. And then EMS world, this is kind of scary to me because I'm looking at the mean scene times. If you're looking at 218, it starts at level 1, the mean time is 17 minutes all the way down. But you're looking at level 4 hospitals, I'm not sure what that has to do with it, other than a mean scene time of 38 minutes.
You saw the same number I did.
I mean, there is a good metric on that. A metric that is called as 10 minutes. And obviously none of those even come close. And that's
Right.
the average.
Right, but again, I want to stress, this is the times from only the patients that made it into the trauma registry. So, with the number only of 35, there could have been some outliers that skewed So we didn't do a full analysis on the scene times because we've got more data on the EMS side.
Well, I'm not trying to pin you to the wall, but the thing that worries me is these are the critical patients. These are the most critical, you know. So we got two things. We either got some data mismatching or we got some bad problems. And we shouldn't be on scene that length of time. So I appreciate what you're doing. I think we just need to dial that in and find out what's going on. The other thing is down on the bottom of that page, or towards the bottom page, on the time to definitive care, that's the time till they arrive at a hospital. So if I picked up a patient in Swainsboro who was ISS of 15, I took him to a manual medical center and they stayed there. That's that number.
Marie, are you looking at that one? So number 4 on page 140. I believe that was to the first hospital, but I'd have to get Dan Lynn to confirm that.
It says arrived at hospital time. So sometime.
Well, I did talk to Dan Lynn about on the double trauma, you know, on the train, not the double trauma transfers, but the trauma transfers. So I don't know if that was included in this, is to have the second hospital on the linked records for that. But because those numbers are, yeah, I'll have to check with Dan Lynn about that.
And I know it's trying to match different data points and different records in different places, and I can only imagine how big a pain that is. But I would really like for you to bring this back to MSAC. And I'm not good. I don't share the group, but I certainly called him. If we need to figure those numbers out, because if we have people who are staying on scene with critical patients and don't know that they need to get on the road to a trauma center quickly, we got a huge education issue. And if the numbers are wrong, we've got a huge issue with getting the right numbers.
This is Marie. The data that's in the tables for the scene time and the time to definitive care, the hospital level is the first facility.
Okay, thank you.
So when it says time to definitive care down at the bottom with 4A, is that still the first, just the first facility, or is that to the second facility or the trauma center first?
It's the first facility. She didn't drill down into the second or third. It's just the facility is listed for every record.
But now that she's established the way to link those records, obviously we could try and do that analysis on the second hospital, because the third, as we said, it might not be valuable to do on just 31, but with the second hospital, that would definitely be valuable, especially if they're going to a higher level.
I think for our definition, the way we talk, or at least the way I think, is when you say definitive, or when we say definitive care, we mean the highest level trauma center. So like if it's going to a non-trauma center from scene, picked up, goes to a non-trauma center, or maybe a level 4, and then ends up at a 2 or a 1 and they stay there, you know, for most of their care, that would be definitive care. So when if you're going to say to the first hospital, I might just say, instead of total time to definitive care, just time to first hospital or time to hospital.
Yeah, and I'll talk with Dan Lynn about updating that for the next.
Just so we all get on the same page with the nomenclature, it'll just make it clean in the future.
One other thing, David, I read where, and I get, looks like less than half of the data records you got are actually useful because they have all the valid data points in them. I'm reading that right.
Right, so keep in mind, when a trauma registrar, they have to manually abstract that data right now. Once we link the records with EMS, then we're just gonna be able to pull all the times from EMS. So there won't be as many missing data points. Okay. Because they're having to literally take the trauma registry and type in from the EMS record into the trauma registry right now. And that's what we're trying to avoid in the future, is double entry, because the medics are already entering it. So that's the goal, is for the linkage to records, so we can just pull all those times directly from the EMS record.
Yeah, for my goal, it ought to be linked back to the CAD system that's linked to the AT&T system, so nobody is entering data, computer enters data. I think we will be ahead of the game. My question was, the validation rules you just sent out, will that help with this?
Yes, well, so it'll help with the EMS data. And that was one of the other things I was going to talk about. So we've released, with our EMS data, right, we collect a large amount of EMS data for your 2.5 million records. We're trying to make that data a lot better. And so we've actually released some new validation rules that they call them business logic rules to make sure the data coming in is clean. And a lot of the ones that we just released, which go effective September 1st, we always have to give time for software vendors to implement them. But a lot of them are based on system of care metrics. Did they, call ahead and notify the hospital of a STEMI alert or a trauma alert or a stroke alert, stuff like that. We've also been interested in how far they're traveling patient loaded miles. So how many miles are they actually traveling from the scene to the first hospital, second, right? So we've added that in there. Also wall times. That has been kind of a thing these days, is medics standing on the wall trying to get that. In some areas, it's been an issue already, and we're trying to address that, but we have to be able to measure it first. And so we're making that time where I arrive at the hospital on the ambulance bay, and then I transfer my patient. The difference between that is what we're calling the wall time. We just have to mandate that the medics actually record that time. So that's actually in the September 1st release as well. On the line, we have our new EMS data manager. She started this week. I am completely stoked about this. And she's going to be helping with this report with Marie. But her name is Jayleanne Matos McClure. And like I said, she literally just started she just did her virtual orientation yesterday. So she's actually listening in. A couple other things, biospatial. So I've shown y'all before the EMS data from biospatial and the advanced visualizations it will do. They are right now importing our trauma data into that. So trauma hospitals, just like Courtney can go on and log in and see his EMS agency data in there, his hospital will be able to go in and see their trauma registry data. At the state level, we'll be able to see the whole system, but each hospital will be able to see their data, and it has an explorer widget where they can, they can set what visualization they want to see on there. So by the next trauma commission meeting, that will be in place. He didn't want to promise me this, but he said it should be done by the end of August. So once we have that, we'll do a training with all the hospitals to show them how to use that system and kind of get them logged in and kind of show them how to use the data visualizations. The ultimate goal of that is to link all of the records in that system. And when I say all of the records, I don't mean just EMS and trauma registry. I mean crash records, EMS records, and trauma registry. The last portion that we don't have yet, and that's not ours, I mean, it's the crash records. And that's just because of who the crash records come from. Let's see, a couple other things. Y'all have heard of the whole, the Grady, the Regional Coordinating Center for the Metro Atlanta region. So that's already been in place. That's been long-term now. So the General Assembly did give us funding to fund that for them. We're actually going to be hiring a DPH person to help with that, to be the liaison between the RCC and the hospitals, the other hospitals. So it's not just a Grady thing, it's a DPH thing. And so that's there. The Georgia, or the Governor's Office of Highway Safety, they're the ones who control the money that comes down from NHTSA, and they make requests on that. We requested several months ago, probably about a year ago, for them to ask NHTSA for additional money for NHTSA Office of EMS statewide assessment, and that's been approved. So that will occur sometime in federal fiscal year 21, which obviously starts October 1st and goes until September 30th. We're thinking next summer, knock on wood, that COVID is not still an issue then, but that is our goal, is to have a statewide EMS assessment, which would include our systems of care. So not, so trauma, stroke, cardiac, all of that. The goal of that one would then be to look at that system, look at our whole system, and then make changes as necessary so that when ACS comes to do the visit, we will have progressed significantly with that. And I think that's all I've got.
David, I think this is, great work. Thank you very much for y'all working so hard on this thing. Tell there's been a lot of hours put in. I need to spend a little time, trying to digest all this, but on page 124, I probably ask a lot of questions, but I've sort of reserved those till I have more time to study it. But the table on 124 says frequency of patients with ISS greater than 15 by level and year. So you see the level 1 trauma center there. So this is this patients, at the top it says frequency of patients with ISS greater than 15 not cared for in a level 1 or 2 trauma center.
That was the goal, is to look at what percentage was not there, but the table actually shows 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s. So the goal was, well, what percentage of ISS greater than 15 are not being treated at a level 1 or 2? But we're still showing you what's being treated. We just highlighted what's not being treated at a level 1 or 2. Correct. In the overall,
Looks like about
it's only like
24.8%, 5% are not.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I misread this. So this is at trauma centers,
Correct.
but not at 1 or 2 trauma centers. But so some of them are being treated at 3s and 4s.
Right, but a
I
very,
misread
We thought you'd need the 1s and 2s just for context
Okay.
to kind of know what.
Well, I misread it as like how many, in my mind, it went back to some old data that we looked at with how many patients are with ISS greater than 15 that are not treated at a trauma center.
Mhm.
And that was about, when we started, at least 35%, maybe. It was a large number. And then, so hopefully that number's coming down. So I was wondering how you knew.
So these are only the
not
ones,
treated at a trauma.
right? Well, so obviously we can't perfectly calculate an ISS off of EMS data.
Yeah.
But one of the validation rules that we did add, there's a section in the EMS data set where they use the CDC field triage criteria. That's never been a mandatory section until September. So we're actually kind of forcing them to do that. And then we did a training back in June to make sure they understood this is what's coming down the pipe. We really want you to record this so that we can look at that data and say, all right, of all of the 911 EMS transports, are they going to a level 1 or 2 trauma center? Because this is only the ones that made it to a trauma registry.
Yeah.
There's still ones that never made it into a trauma registry that we want to focus on.
Yeah, is that something you can figure out? The ones that didn't make it?
Yeah,
to,
but again, I can't calculate an ISS just based off of EMS data,
Sure.
but I can look at those ones that if they met level 1 or level 2 or step 1 or step 2 of the CDC field triage criteria, I can see what percentage of those did make it to a trauma center in general, and then next would be a level 1 or level 2 trauma center.
Okay.
And then we'll have the PROC data because he's contracted this year to redo that.
Because PROC used
ICUS.
an ICISS score
Based off the discharge.
based on ICD-9 data, discharge data. He runs it through this black box, and he sort of comes up with a 5-year rolling thing. But anyway, there's a way to do it, and that's how we got those numbers and knew who was out there and who wasn't out there as far as trauma centers. So anyway, we'll make sure he's hooked up with David. We'll need to work together, and he'll generate a lot of good data. I think you'll find interesting too. Okay.
If we could validate the proxy of the type 1, type 2 on the CDC field triage criteria, there's no way of doing that, but prospectively, if POC looks at the ICA scores and David's got the EMS having to select as a mandatory field, then we can match up or try to match up those to validate that the information that the medic has put in is an indicator of severity.
Yeah, you
To
can
have to
see,
choose that.
you can see how accurate that is. That's a good idea.
That big calculation for ICUS.
Yeah.
She's less than 90, obviously. There's no validation of that yet.
Yeah, just from the EMS spreadsheet or script sheet, you could know very quickly from quarter to quarter how you're doing, and just once we validate it. But Pratt and David could do that, through your work. That would be good. I do not want to be in the room when y'all crack the numbers on that, though. That'd be painful.
I know you like numbers. You can come.
Put some Tylenol. Yeah.
And if you do really well on that, you get to graduate onto the funding formulas.
There you go, yeah.
Just very quickly, of course, due to COVID, many of the site visits were canceled, rescheduled. I really feel for Kennestone. They were a day away from their ACS verification visit when all this happened. So several went in, and I think Grady was the very next week. So all of those were canceled. Any remainder ACS visits for this year have been canceled, and they're talking now at least of that of 2021 and possibly later on some. And we've gotten, so I was on the phone with them for quite a while last week and was talking to them about some of the visits, and they just really at this point have no clue where things are going to fold out. They, you know, it's just an ever evolving wheel with them. We did talk about some options, what they plan to do as far as the ACS visits are concerned, and theirs is at this point is just to push them out further. Well, the dilemma that we have is we have a couple of hospitals, which all of the hospitals, the ones and twos, have had consults, but we had a couple of facilities that are waiting for their verification visits and were scheduled, so those have been pushed out. So some of them, because of the consult visits and them being pushed out, will put them way out of the parameter of any official designation. So we have made the decision to go in at some point and do either an interim visit at the state level to continue that. That's still being worked out as far as we've talked about some parts of those visits being virtual and maybe just take 2 people in to do the chart reviews and do that kind of stuff. So we're working on those. We do have about 5 hospitals that were already lined up for redesignations and 1 new facility. And I think if things kind of continue like they're going for right now, we may could get most of those in. Well, we may could get about 4 of them in before December in some fashion. And then the goal was to at least have half of the ones caught up before June of next year. And again, at this point, I think that's doable, but we'll just have to kind of wait and see. The one thing I would like for everybody to kind of keep a heads up in the next week or so, I'm going to send an email out to everyone to introduce Juana Smith to everybody. She is our admin person over cardiac care, but she's also going to assist me in some of these visits. And what she will be doing is basically a doodle poll for the dates of the designation visits for those that are eligible in those areas to assist us with site visits. Throw out the dates and you can doodle poll back what you're available for. And she'll be the admin arranging some of those visits, so you won't have to hear me gripe and fuss at you about visits. So if you get the emails and there's somebody that in your department that's not identified as being able to do some visits, please let me and let myself and Juana know who those folks might be. We have a large gap with EMS. I mean, not EMS, but emergency physicians. We're just not feeling that really. The surgeons, I do have to admit, those I've called on, even Dr. Ashley went and had done a visit for me recently. So they're pretty good. But as Lori mentioned, we've had quite a bit of turnover in facilities. We've had like complete turnovers in 2 of our level 1 and a level 2. And so we're trying to gain ground back with some of those to get them back up to speed. But just to let you know, we're working on some of those things of how to integrate the visits in this era of COVID. And so, when we send the emails out, if you would just respond. And if you say, no, I'm not doing site visits or I'm not available for that particular one, it won't necessarily be held against you. I won't come after you. But the more people that we have in the pool, maybe the quicker we can get caught up and have some of these visits done. So I appreciate your time and effort on this. And you'll be hearing from me if yours is coming up. And once we maybe get some, I don't know if we'll ever get, at least through this year, not get any accurate numbers from the college on their visits. But primarily the ones that deal with the college is the ones that we'll be having to do an in-between visit with, is the ones who are waiting for their verification visit. They've had the consult, but they did not have a verification visit yet. The re-verifications, we're not as concerned, but the ones who are in that gap between the consult and the verification. So that's where we are. Any questions?
All right, well, thanks, David, and please make sure Marie and Danlin and everybody knows how much and everybody that worked on this, how much we appreciate it. And I know they worked hard on this, so it's much, much appreciated. With that, there's so much work here, and for those of you that may recall, we did have a data subcommittee. Many of us participated on that. From Dr. O'Neill was on that. State office, the governor's office, I think was on. There was a lot of people on that committee. So I really think it's time now that we've got so much data and some things going on that we need to sort of rejuvenate that, Liz, the data subcommittee, and get membership back on it, appropriate people, because that's where a lot of this work took place. That's where the first PRAC analysis that came out of that subcommittee. That was a 242-page document, and just a lot of data that came out of it. So I think this data tied into what you're doing, David, so we all were working on the same page. That would be good, a good place for everybody to work and discuss this data. With that being said, I think let's rejuvenate that while I'm getting the word.
Yeah, I think it's good timing because we're going to have that PROC pre-analysis. So
Yeah.
along with this, I think it's.
I think, I don't want to catch my colleague off guard, but I think Dr. Dunn, you would be excellent to chair that committee with your interest in data. And would you accept that committee role?
Happy to.
Thank you.
Usually it goes to the person who didn't show up, but unfortunately, Dr. Dunn, you showed up and still got it.
Okay. So Liz, why don't we get that organized and the people on the committee, and we'll go from there. Okay. Well, with that being said, thanks again, David, for your report, and Renee. At this time, we're open for new business. Is there anything that we've left out? Anything exciting that happened since the agenda was published? I don't have anything.
I gave you all the updates in my reports, so there's nothing additional.
Okay. All right. Well, it's good to see everybody again. I appreciate all the subcommittee's hard work, and we will adjourn.
Do we need a motion officially?
Oh,
Okay.
we have to do it officially. I don't have that authority.
I'll make that motion.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Second? Did I hear Jay?
Yes, sir.
Jay's there. Jay is
Yeah,
there.
that's Jay. Thank you, Dr. Smith.
All those in favor for adjournment? Aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned officially.
Next meeting in November. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, everyone. With that, the meeting is terminated. Thanks for attending.
Terminated.